Let me focus as well on jobs. Something we do frequently is put up the unemployment chart dating back to February of 2009 when it was at 8.2%, the first full month of the Obama presidency. The high point, of course, October 2009, over 10%. March of 2011, it's at 8.8%. Mitt Romney, who looks like he's going to run to challenge the president next year, has taken aim at the record on jobs of this administration.
Across the nation, over 20 million Americans still can't find a job or have given up looking. How has this happened in the nation that leads the world in innovation and productivity? The answer is that President Obama's policies have failed. He and virtually all the people around him have never worked in the real economy. They just don't know how jobs are created in the private sector.
He's not just taking aim at the president, he's taking aim at you, too.
It's just about politics, and I understand that. People have to say those kind of things. But if you look at what's happened to this economy over the last 2.5 years, this president came in and he did what was necessary to prevent the Great Depression, to put out a terribly damaging financial fire that was engulfing not just this economy but the global economy as a whole. And for 18 months, this economy has been growing. People have been creating jobs. We've had more than 1 million jobs created in the private sector just over this last year. And we had job creation come back stronger and faster than you saw in the last two recoveries. Now, we have a lot of challenges ahead. Unemployment's still close to 9%. A lot of people are hurting still. It's a very tough economy still.
Is it still a jobs crisis?
Well, we're still in a deeply difficult, deeply challenging economy for millions and millions of Americans. And that is because this crisis was so severe and the scars ran so deep, and it's just going to take more time to heal it. But our economy is getting stronger, and don't bet against this economy. Again, if you look at productivity growth, you look at the strength of private investment by businesses, you look at what's happening to U.S. exports, you look at how strong high technology is. The agricultural economy in the United States is the strongest in decades. There is a lot of sign of not just healing, but strength and resilience and dynamism in the economy because of the policies this President of the United States put in place. Now, but we have a lot of work to do, and we're going to have a debate about what the best strategy is for the country going forward. But I want to come back to where you began, though, David, in this, because it's very important people understand that we may disagree exactly on what the best strategy is for dealing with future entitlements. We may disagree on what we have to do on tax reform to fix our broken tax code. But we all have to understand it is absolutely essential that we put in place a set of targets and timelines and credible enforcement measures that will bring our fiscal position back down to balance. Because to do that, we have to live within our means so that we can afford to make the investments and things necessary to make sure our economy grows in the future.
I want to get into some of the high points on the budget, but before I leave jobs, by next fall, yes, it's the election calendar, do you think unemployment is still above 8%?
You know, if you look at what private economists say about the economy, you know, there's a lot of uncertainty in forecasts, no magic in forecasts. There's much more confidence now that we're going to have pretty steady, solid growth over this period of time. And enough jobs created, you're going to see the unemployment rate fall to 8%. Some people say below 8% by the end of 2012. But again, that's private economists, and this is, you know, obviously inherently uncertain.
I want to talk about the budget, but let's start with the tax fight. The president made it very clear, reacting to Chairman Paul Ryan's budget proposal, which includes a lot of tax cuts, that he wasn't going to go there.
We cannot afford $1 trillion worth of tax cuts for every millionaire and billionaire in our society. We can't afford it. And I refuse to renew them again.
That's a veto threat.
Well, you know, the president's been very clear on this from the beginning, and he's got absolutely the right position for the economy as a whole. The taxes the most fortunate Americans pay today are lower than they've been in a decade. And in order to sustain them, if you wanted to try to sustain those tax breaks, you have to do one of two things. You have to either cut incredibly deeply into commitments to our seniors, to the elderly, to the poor, to the disabled, or you have to gut spending on defense, or you have to gut spending on education, or you have to ask me to go out and borrow trillions of dollars from China, from Americans, from our children, to afford those. And we're not prepared to do that. And it is not necessary to do that, and it would not be responsible to do that. So when the president says we can't afford it, he's absolutely right.
But can you really pursue a policy where you cut the deficit if you exempt the middle class from any pain in terms of tax hikes?
No, absolutely. This has to be balanced. It's going to touch all Americans. The framework the president laid out on Wednesday of this week was a comprehensive, balanced set of cuts on spending, things that'll affect.
Right, but I'm asking about taxes because he says no way am I raising taxes on those making $250,000 or less.
Well, let me just say these spending reforms the president talked about, they will touch all Americans. Now, on the tax side, if you look at the way our tax code is structured, and it's a broken tax code, we spend hundreds of billions of dollars a year on special tax expenditures, special tax breaks that go to the wealthiest Americans. So we have plenty of room in this tax code that will result in just a modest increase in the burden on the most fortunate. And if we do that, then we can afford to, along with other spending cuts, we can preserve the commitments we made to our seniors, to the disabled, to the poor, and we can still make sure we're investing in education.
But the president has said that Paul Ryan's plan was not a serious plan. He's basically said no way, no how on renewing the Bush-era tax cuts. And you're talking about working in parallel tracks and getting something done. Hasn't he completely poisoned the well here? Look what we just went through 2 weeks ago.
What we're going to do is what's good for the economy, and we all recognize, of course the president understands this and Republican leadership understand this, that we have to do this together. There is no way we can...
But how do you do that, Mr. Secretary? The president just basically gave the back of his hand to what Republicans were
proposing. We've been talking very actively to Republicans throughout this process. We're going to continue to do it. I spoke to Senator Coburn on Friday. I spoke to Senator Conrad on Thursday. We sat with Alan Simpson and Erskine Bowles, who chaired the Bipartisan Commission in the Oval Office on Thursday. And absolutely we have to do this together. But I think if you listen carefully, and listen carefully to this debate now, you're seeing both sides say we need to do about $4 trillion in deficit reduction over a period of about 10 to 12 years. We disagree on how we want to do it, but what we want to do now is, again, because the world's watching us, David, we want to find where we can agree, and we can agree on the broad targets, and make sure that we lock that in, and that'll give us a little bit of time to work out our disagreements on
things
like
tax hikes won't hurt economic recovery?
No, absolutely. There's an important thing for people to recognize about this. Fixing our fiscal problem is going to require us doing tough things, again, that are going to touch all Americans.
But to that point...
But hold on just one second. But it's very important to understand this, okay? But we can do this, we can handle this without putting an undue burden on the economy as a whole and without adding to the burden of the middle class. It is perfectly within our capacity as a country, and you do not need to make savage, deep cuts in these entitlement programs to our seniors, commitments we made for generations. You do not need to abandon those commitments in order to bring some balance to our